I am calling the Diversion Board of Authority meeting to order. It's September 23rd, 2021. It is 3:31 p.m. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mayor Dardis?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Here.
Mr. Emminger? Mr. Strand?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mrs. Sherling?
I'm here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Mr. Olson? Mr. Seldebold?
Here.
Quorum is present.
Be done. Moving on to number 2, approval of minutes from the August 26, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second, Campbell.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, I believe this is a voice call vote, so all in approver signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You're opposed or?
That was a delay.
It was delay aye, okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to number 3, approval of the order of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Steen, second.
Any further discussion? I believe this is also a voice call vote. I don't have it on my sheet, so I'm not sure. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the order of agenda is approved. Moving on to the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Strand moves approval.
Steen, seconds.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Because these are a lot of reports, I will need to do a roll call vote. So could I get a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mayor Dardis?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Strand?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Seldebold?
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you. The consent agenda has been approved, which is a lot of items on there. Moving on to our regular agenda, I turn it over to you, Mr. Paulson, for the Executive Director report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Just a few items here I'd like to talk to you about the activities of the authority over the last month and where we're going next month. A lot of activities have been occurring on the P3 side with the Red River Valley Alliance. We did have commercial close last month, as you know, and we're moving expeditiously towards financial close. Right now that is scheduled to occur on October 14th. So a lot of activity with our finance team and their finance team and going through all of the different bonding and financial arrangements. If any of you were at the finance committee yesterday, you heard Mr. Shockley talk about the activities that him and his consultants and his staff are working on, and it's quite fascinating. We also have been doing a lot of coordinating on the schedule and the permitting side with the Red River Valley Alliance, permitting with the DNR and the OSC, and getting those relationships started. We also have provided that limited notice to proceed for the Red River Valley Alliance. So they are here in town, they are establishing an office, and they are starting to conduct some utility surveys and property surveys as well. And so we do expect a lot more activity to just start ramping up from here on out with the anticipated start of construction next spring. As far as some of the authorities planning items, the board's aware we are bringing a contingent of the board to Washington, D.C. Next week. It's quite excellent timing from all perspectives. The board's aware that the Congress is deliberating the infrastructure bill. We are anticipating that to be voted on potentially as early as next week while we're there. For the board's awareness, that bill does contain $11.5 billion of appropriation to the Corps' work account. Incidentally, just 2 days ago, the continuing resolution was passed by Congress that also contained an additional $3 billion in Corps appropriations for their civil works account, of which 1.5 billion of that would be available for infrastructure projects. The other 1.5 billion is going to Hurricane Irma cleanup. So that leaves us with about 13 billion of additional funding for the core work program, which is huge, considering their normal annual appropriations is around 2 to 3 billion per year. So I think that really gives us a lot of leverage while we're there, given the status of where we're at with the project. We're building it, it's under construction, and really it's that federal funding piece, because they are appropriating on a year-over-year basis. That is really kind of our biggest risk to keeping the program on schedule. We also have a lot of additional meetings scheduled with both federal delegations from Minnesota and North Dakota, as well as the Corps of Engineers, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, and we are finalizing our OMB meeting as well. We've also been spending a lot of time this month working on the draft 2022 cash budget, and that was contained within your packet. I believe Mr. Dardis might have just a little to discuss and report from the Finance Committee yesterday, but certainly we'll take some time if there's any questions later in the meeting today. And then we are working on our next hire, which is the Director of Lands and Compliance, and those interviews were held with 3 finalists, and we are working through right now that selection process. A lot of ongoing coordination that our communications director and engineering director have been working on. Martin and I did attend a meeting with leadership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, St. Paul District, earlier in the month. And I felt that was a very advantageous meeting. We talked about scope transfer between the federal and the non-federal side, and quite a few other different just coordination items with the St. Paul District. We've also been doing a lot of coordination with Minnesota DNR on their permit conditions to get clarification for property owners and how we're going to be approaching some of that on the Minnesota side. And then, as you know, Mr. Bachigard has really been involved very intently on getting utility, township, and municipality MOUs, and there's a few of them in your packet for consideration here today. And then, of course, we've had John and the rest of the team, and myself included, continuing to work on provisions contained within the settlement agreement related to certain projects in Comstock, Georgetown, Christine, and then the cemeteries that are impacted by the upstream mitigation area. So with that, certainly free to answer any questions if the board has any or any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any questions? Whoever's on the phone, if you can mute yourself, please, so we don't get a lot of background and feedback noise, that'd be fantastic. Any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you.
Moving on to General Counsel update. I will turn this over to you, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. Before you have a resolution authorizing the execution of the number of documents that are necessary for the financial close. As the Executive Director had noted, we are scheduled to have financial close on October 14th. Just a reminder, financial close relates to the financial closing under the project agreement. So in mid-August, we had commercial close in which the parties signed off on the project agreement. And then between commercial close and financial close, the developer is assembling its financing, that it's bringing all of its private equity, its loans and bonds and different obligations to the table so that it can provide funds to start the construction of the project. As part of that, the financial team portion of the P3 has been working a lot regarding the issuance of the PABS bonds and assisting and reviewing the developer's financing. The resolution authorizes a number of things. The first is the continuing disclosure undertaking. Most of the entities that you're a board member of have bond issues and other debt obligations in which you have continuing reporting requirements and disclosure requirements regarding those bonds. Even though the authority is not necessarily a party to the developer's financing, as part of that financing, there's certain disclosures that need to be done with banks, bondholders, and other institutions. And so we have some limited continuing disclosure obligations. The second item is the lender's direct agreement. You've previously approved the form of the lender's direct agreement as part of the master indenture of trust. That is the agreement that sits between the master indenture of trust or the diversion authority and then the developer's financing. So kind of think about it as the center of the spider web, if you would. It's where money goes in on one side and it comes out on the other side and goes over to the developer's side of the transaction. And then the final item is a small amendment to the project agreement. We have been working with the developer regarding potential savings in their financial model. When we reached commercial close, we had the financial model they had submitted with their bid that became part of the project agreement. This amendment will incorporate that new financial model, which will slightly change the availability payments for the non-flood control elements along with the flood control elements of the project. So that gets substituted into the project agreement. And then there's one minor change to one of the technical requirements. And so this authorizes the chair and the executive director to go ahead and sign those closing documents as part of the P3 transaction. I expect that the financial close will be very similar to the commercial close, and that'll be ongoing most of the day on the 14th. And at some point later in the evening on the 14th, we'll be able to declare that we've reached financial close. So happy to answer any questions. We went into a little bit more detail the finance committee meeting yesterday, but happy to answer any questions about the process.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions in regards to the financial close authorization? Anyone on the phone? All right, hearing none, I would look forward to a motion for this